your Q&A box open as well as your chat box open. As always, for Tuesday Talks, we like to have dialogue, and we know that you're not the Q&A box open. Sorry, we're not able to see you, but we know you're here because we can see the names and numbers. And so if you have a question, we like it when you ask us earlier so we can fold it into our conversation and make sure we cover as many questions as possible. I know a lot of people don't think of their questions until the last 5 minutes, and then we end up being like, oh no, we couldn't answer your question. So if you already have a question, you're like, what is holistic review? Or do you actually read our essays or something like that? Go ahead and put those in the chat right away. And also, I know that some of you have been saying how many Tuesday Talks are happening this summer, and that is a very good question. I am still putting together the lineup. Now that we are fully back in travel mode, all these admissions officers, and they've had a really kind of crazy cycle. And I think last week was the first week that some of them were able to breathe and take a vacation and maybe start that long list of things that they had to do. They got to do this past week. So thank you to my esteemed guests today for joining me. I know that some of you just got off a little break, and so I'm really happy to see you today. Okay, so again, nuts and bolts. If you don't have your Q&A box open yet, go ahead and open that up. And first, before we start on the topic, I'm going to have my guests introduce themselves really quickly. They're going to tell you their name and where they work and a fun fact about themselves. So Libby, do you want to start us off?
I can. Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Libby Bergeron. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an Associate Dean of Admissions at Bowdoin College, located in Brunswick, Maine. Gloria reminded me I needed a fun fact, so we will see what I come up with. I really enjoy learning languages, both kind of formally through classes as well as kind of online. I am conversational in German, but I'm working on both my French and Japanese right now. And I will pass it to Brandeis. So Pam.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Pan Luo, and I am the Associate Director of International Missions at Brandeis University. I was actually born and raised in China and was previously an international student myself, so definitely understand how nerve-wracking but exciting the process is here for you, right? And I'm very committed to supporting our students who are embarking on this journey. In terms of a fun fact about myself, I actually have a tree as my godfather. When I was very, very little, my parents took me to Yunnan province, and guess what? They just found a tree, yes, a legitimate tree, and said, meet your godfather. And then since then, I have a godfather as I have a tree as my godfather. So that was my fun fact, and very happy to be here with Gloria and all of the lovely ladies here. And I'll kick it off to Jackie.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jackie Mandart. I work for Vassar College, and I'm an Associate Director of International Admissions at Vassar. So my fun fact would be that while most children in the US learn to ride a bike when they are very young, I actually learned to ride a bike when I was 31 during the pandemic. Gloria's very surprised because she didn't know this. So yeah, I learned to ride a bike very recently in New York City during the pandemic, and it was very fun to finally join the club. And I will pass it over to Miranda.
Hi, everyone. My name is Miranda Zwolle, and I'm an Associate Dean of Admission at Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut. And a fun fact is, because I'm in the process of moving to a new house right now, I'm getting much better at furniture assembly and becoming increasingly handy. So that's been fun, kind of.
Nice. See, you guys, this is what is so fun about the fun fact, because I've known like many of the admissions officers I invite to Tuesday Talks, I've known in some capacity for years even. And every time I do this, I'm surprised by something. So I love it. And I feel like that's the wonderful thing about these connections that we make. Okay, so again, in case you don't know who I am, I'm Gloria. I'm one of the co-founders of Initial View, host of Tuesday Talks. Some of you know me as, and I was sharing with these friends that I've done this so many times that I've run out of fun facts. So, but I think I'll share. My fun fact is this past week I got an email from a psychology professor at Wellesley, where I went to college, telling me that my thesis advisor is retiring. And so I got to kind of go back down memory lane and think about all the things, the wonderful things I gained from my college experience, which was a great thing to do right before Tuesday Talk to bolster kind of like the importance of this process in your life and how it can really change the trajectory of your life if you're open to it. So, and I am delighted to have these wonderful guests because they represent very unique institutions, some similar values, some similar ways that they look at applicants, but also differences. And that's the benefit of doing Tuesday Talks is we get to learn about the similarities and differences of each institution. Before we dive into holistic review, which is what the meat of the topic is, each of these colleges are going to share a quick introduction of what their institution is like. That gives you a little bit of context on why they look at the application the way they do. But it's also a way for you to kind of understand all the wonderful options you have out there. So I think Bowdoin is going to start.
We sure are. Hi, everyone again. I'm so excited to be able to tell you a little bit about Bowdoin College. As I mentioned, it is located in Brunswick, Maine. Our undergraduate population is just under 2,000 students. The student to faculty ratio is 9:1, and the average class size is about 16 students. The three kind of big things I like to talk about as it pertains to Bowdoin are our location in Maine, this idea of the common good, and our commitment to access. So we'll start with Maine. Maine is located in the top northeast corner of the United States, bordering Canada and the state of New Hampshire. And Brunswick is located right along the coast of Maine. So we're 30 minutes from the ocean, and we have our Schiller Coastal Studies Center, which lends itself really well to students interested in academic research and really using nature as their classroom. So a lot of faculty will use the Coastal Studies Center during their class period to get students outside and learning outside. And then the outing club, the Bowdoin Outing Club, is our most popular club on campus. And we want to make sure our students are hiking and biking and skiing if that is something of interest to you, whether you do it already or you're interested in learning. The idea of the common good is this commitment that our 7th president kind of started, and it's this idea that we should be not hoarding our education for ourselves, and we should be trying to leave spaces better than how we found them. So we have the McKean Center for the Common Good, which is a space dedicated to volunteerism locally, nationally, and internationally, and helping students think about careers in public service and ways that they can lead lives of service, both during Bowdoin and their time after Bowdoin. And then finally, our commitment to access. That means access to professors, that means access to your peers, emphasizing that small community, but it also means access generally to your education at Bowdoin. So Bowdoin is need blind for all applicants, domestic and international. We meet 100% of demonstrated need with grants and not loans. So that is money you do not need to pay back to Bowdoin. And this is our 3rd year of the Digital Excellence Commitment, which means that every student receives a MacBook Pro, iPad Mini, Apple Pencil, and it has all the software you need to be successful at Bowdoin. So I will pass it along to Pan at Brandeis to talk a little bit more about them.
Thank you so much, Libby. So, all right. So when it comes to Brandeis, there are also many wonderful things that I can share, but I want to kind of like follow what Libby started off, like the power of 3. So I will also just use 3 words to capture the essence of who we are. And those 3 words are diversity, community, and opportunity. So first thing first, diversity. Brandeis University, we were actually founded at a very particular time for a very particular reason. So we were founded in 1948 when many colleges and universities in the nation were placing quotas on students based on their race, gender, ethnicities, religions, and nationalities. So members of the American Jewish community, they got together and created Brandeis to be a place that is safe, welcoming, and inclusive for students from all backgrounds to join. So till today, the commitment to inclusivity still remain at the very core of what we do. With 20% of our students being international, coming from more than 100 different countries, diversity is not just a buzzword, it's really in our DNA. All right, so the second word, community. At Brandeis, we are truly a community of scientists, entrepreneurs, politicians, musicians, advocates, you name it. With 3,500 undergraduate students and 10-to-1 faculty-student ratio, your professors, they will truly know you by your name, by your face. So when we see community at Brandeis, we're talking about more than just a group of people sharing this common space. We're talking about very supportive ecosystem that every voice is valued. And then that leads me to my third word, which is opportunity. So Brandeis University, we are actually a tier 1 top research university with a commitment to the liberal arts. So we offer tons of different opportunities when it comes to research, double major, study abroad. So you can see here on the slide, 50% close to, actually we do not have it here, but I'll share. Oh yeah, we do. Like close to 50% of our students tend to double major, and 40% of our students actually tend to study abroad. So lots of opportunity for you to truly explore who you are as a person, explore your interests. So not to mention our clear location being close to Boston, we're in a town called Waltham. Truly, this is like a global community with lots of different opportunities for personal growth, networking, and job opportunities afterwards. And I'll kick it off to Jackie at Vassar.
Great. Thanks so much, Pan. So hi, everybody. And I'm excited for y'all to learn a little bit about Vassar. So we were founded in 1861 as an all-women's institution. And so our campus has changed a lot since then. We have been co-ed since the 1960s, but that spirit of serving folks who are underserved in the higher education space has really continued. Our campus is very diverse. We've got about 2,500 students coming from many US states as well as many countries around the world. Our students speak over 50 languages, and we're really excited about the perspective that they bring to the classroom and to our residence halls, to clubs, and all of that on campus. So we're located in the town of Poughkeepsie, which is just above New York City, about an hour and a half north of New York City. And so it's very easy for our students to get to campus coming from wherever in the world they're coming from because of the ease of access of New York City. But they also are able to use New York City in many, many ways, whether it's for an internship or for, to go to a concert, something fun. So they're really able to use the city to their advantage. We are a liberal arts college at our core, and we have an open curriculum. We make sure our students can explore. Our students are really curious, and so they've got many different options to choose from, and many students double major at a minor, or what we call a correlate. 90% of our students engage in some type of internship, research opportunity, field work, or something hands-on by the time they graduate. And so we really try and encourage students to get actual experience in their fields, whether that's in the local area, in New York City, abroad, wherever that may be. Most of our students live on campus. We've got a beautiful campus, about 1,000 acres, which includes a 500-acre farm and ecological preserve. Our students love hiking and they love going outside, and so they can do that right on campus, but they of course have the beautiful Hudson Valley in New York State to explore. And then when it comes to life after graduation, again, many of our students have the opportunity to do an internship before they graduate. And so they have really incredible opportunities after they graduate. Many of our students go on to full-time employment right away, but a lot of them also go on to graduate school. Over 3/4 of our alumni at some point have a graduate degree. And we've got very strong acceptance rates to law school and medical school, which we're extremely proud of. And our students really participate in a lot on campus. They take advantage of the wide range of things that are going on here. And whether that might be music or it may be service, athletics, they really have a great time on campus at Vassar and are able to share their gifts with our community. So with that, I will pass it along to Miranda.
Thank you, Jackie. So Wesleyan University is a liberal arts and sciences college located in Middletown, Connecticut in the northeastern United States. So we're about a 2-hour trip by train from either New York City or Boston. So there are lots of accessible large city resources within a train trip distance. However, there's so much going on campus that most students will end up spending most of their time on our campus. And we are one of just a handful of colleges in the United States that has a completely open curriculum. What that means is that there are very few requirements. We do not have general education requirements, classes that all students are required to take coming into Wesleyan. Instead, they can choose from any of the 1,000 courses we offer each year. And we have advisors to help them through that selection process. This means that there is a lot of flexibility to customize their programs in the way that's most useful and meaningful to them. It gives more opportunity if students are interested in double majoring because they don't have to spend credits, so to speak, on those general education requirements. So about 50% of our students end up double majoring, often in fields that typically are not thought of together, such as perhaps astronomy and dance, or chemistry and studio art. It's quite common to see students pairing majors that most people don't initially find intuitive to pair, but finding unique connections between those disciplines. We have a 7-to-1 student-teacher ratio, and students have a lot of opportunity to interact directly with their professors. All of our classes are taught by full professors. And we have about 3,000 undergraduate students and 200 graduate students. Because of that small graduate student population, we receive more funding from the National Science Foundation than any other liberal arts college. But because we're so undergraduate focused, most of that funding benefits our undergraduate students. So it's very accessible to get involved in research in any discipline, whether that's STEM, the humanities, or social sciences, and many students get involved during their first year on campus. We also offer a BA/MA program where students in the natural sciences, psychology, or mathematics have an opportunity to stay on campus for an additional year after earning their bachelor's degree to earn a master's degree, and that additional year is tuition free. We also have very high-level programs in the arts at a level that might typically be found inside a conservatory and other universities. So our theater, music, film studies, and studio arts programs draw many students. And life on campus is very active. We are a residential community with guaranteed housing all 4 years, but new types of housing each year. So by your senior year, you might be living in a small house with a group of your friends. And then we have 300 annual arts events on campus. So there's something going on almost every day, maybe multiple things per day. We also have 30 varsity sports teams in the Division III New England Small College Athletic Conference, and students are very engaged in the community. We have a center on campus called the Albritton Center that helps foster that engagement. There's a lot of interest in social justice issues. We also have a career center on campus that offers advising specific to each career track students might be interested in pursuing, and very strong alumni networks. We're fortunate to have a very active alumni network in China as well. And one of the values that we really try to foster at Wesleyan is practical idealism, the idea of not only studying for the sake of gaining knowledge personally, but also being able to apply that to better your local and global communities.
Awesome. All right. Well, that was wonderful. And again, I learned something new about all 4 institutions again, so that was great. And I know that more often than not, once people hear this, their next question is, well, what kind of student are you looking for? So we're going to talk about what that means in the US context of admissions generally, but also maybe a little bit specifically for each of you as well. So Jackie, do you want to talk, kick us off on what exactly is holistic review?
Sure. So you may be able to see on the slide, but there are a lot of pieces to an application. And we really try our best at each of our colleges and many other colleges around the US to do what's called holistic review. And so we take everything that you send to us, and that becomes a part of our decision. There are some things that are going to be super important and some things that are, we may focus on a little bit less, but every piece of the application is a piece of the puzzle of our decision. We really try our best to get to know you as a person, to really understand who you are, what you're passionate about, what makes you tick, what makes you excited. And we really want to make sure that you're going to be a good fit for our institution. All of our institutions have incredibly, intelligent students who are engaged, students who are curious, students who are active on campus, but that's going to look a little different for each of our schools. And so by getting a good understanding of who you are as a student, from your grades and your curriculum and your standardized tests, to who you are maybe as a person through your extracurriculars and your essay and your story and your interview. All of that kind of goes into our decision. And we're going to break that down a little bit. So I am going to turn it over to Libby to talk a little bit about how we assess academics.
Thanks, Jackie. So yeah, we'll start with the academic piece. And the two big pieces that we're looking at are the transcript, which is on the left side, and the secondary school report, which is on the right side. And we'll start with the secondary school report because I will try not to say the words in context too often, but that is really that's the important takeaway here, is everything is in context. The secondary school report gives us a snapshot of your community, your academic community. So how many students are at your school? The school AP policy, what rigor, we'll start with rigor. What rigor is available to you at your school? Do you have APs available? At the school, it looks like there's APs offered in English and math, Spanish. Some schools might not offer APs. Some schools might have an international baccalaureate or an IB program. Some schools might lean into a connection with another college nearby. There's a lot of different ways that rigor can play out on your transcript. So we see that some APs are offered, and then we go over and we look at your transcript and we see, okay, they've taken AP Environmental Science, AP Spanish, AP Calculus, and AP Bio over 11th and 12th. So that really, looking at that school report really helps inform what we're seeing on that transcript. So we're not going to be asking you to take AP classes or advanced rigor that your school doesn't offer. So we really, again, take that information in and look at what's available to you and hope that if there is rigor available, you're taking advantage of some of it. Rank and GPA, again, in context, your school report will help us get a sense for they don't rank. So we can't expect you to be listing that you're the top of the class because no one in your grade is listed as top of the class. And there's a weighted and an unweighted GPA, both on the school report, but each of the grades, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade also have GPAs. So we can see kind of how that's progressing over time. And again, some schools might only have an unweighted GPA or they have both. Some schools don't have grades. Everybody's doing things a little bit differently these days. And so that school report, again, however, whatever information is shared with us is really, really helpful for us to get a sense for how you are doing within your school. So when we then look at your transcript, we're looking for upward trends in both rigor and grades, hopefully. Or if you're an A student, just keep having those A's, taking those A's. So, again, looking at this transcript, student has a couple C's in 9th grade, 1 C in the spring of 10th grade, but then once we get to 11th grade, we're an AB student. And so that's awesome to see that they are, as they start to take some more AP classes, we're seeing more of an AB record. So we're really looking at your whole time in high school and how you're challenging yourself and how you're doing well as you take on that challenge. And then the final piece I'll mention is there is a place at the end of the secondary school report for your counselor or your administrator that fills out the school report to give us a sense for the strength of your curriculum and kind of where your kind of academic achievement and other pieces of your performance in school kind of fall in the community. And so that's really helpful to be, again, give us a sense for how much rigor are you taking in comparison to what's available and how well are you doing in your community. So it's really an overview. It's really just a bunch of information that we are kind of taking bits and pieces of to start to understand kind of how you've done well academically. And then for each of us, it's an assessment of, okay, will they thrive at our institution? Are we setting them up for success to be a good student, to thrive, to enjoy their time at each of our schools? So the secondary school report is really helpful for us to understand what we're looking at when we see your transcript. And again, we're looking at it all as a whole. We're not just looking at 11th and 12th grade. We're really seeing how you've done over your 4 years, and that helps us get a sense for how are you going to do at during your 4 years at each of our institutions. And then I will pass it along. I believe we're talking about extracurriculars next. Hope I'm right on that.
Okay, before we jump to extracurriculars, there are a couple questions, so I wanted to just kind of try to fold some of those in here. I think there are a couple questions. One is internationally, it's a little bit challenging to know, well, students feel often that maybe you don't know about their school. Because how could you possibly visit all the thousands and thousands of schools? Or what if it's a national school and they don't know about the secondary school report? Like, so can you give a little color on how you try to understand the context if you don't have a clear secondary school report? That's the first question. Yeah,
Yep.
we'll start with that.
Yeah, great question, because internationally, every country does things differently. Every curriculum looks a little bit different. And so secondary school report, if your school submits it again, is helpful, and it does not have to be nearly as detailed as this. You know, a secondary school report, we understand, for international schools is something that's not quite as common. So even just telling us, you know, the grading scale, or having, again, a counselor or an administrator let us know that, you know, this is a national curriculum can be helpful, but we recognize that that's not always the case. And so we understand, we have been doing this for a while at this point, have an understanding for general kind of what to expect from each kind of country group. So we understand if there are certain countries that generally have a national curriculum. So then when we look at your transcript, we have a sense of what we're looking at. If there are letters of recommendation, which we'll get to in a little bit, any information that can be provided in a counselor or administrator recommendation or teacher recommendations about the nature of the school community, that is also helpful kind of context for us. So again, kind of listening in on all of these different pieces. We glean from the different pieces of your application, of the transcript, kind of what type of curriculum your school might have, if we're not already familiar with it. But again, we've all been doing this for a few years at this point, and we're pretty familiar with different country systems, with a fair amount of schools, even if we're not visiting them in person. But if we have any questions, we will be absolutely sure to reach out.
Wonderful. There are other questions about this, but we're going to move on because I think through talking about some of the other components of the application, we'll actually revisit some of these questions. So let's keep going and talk about activities and achievement.
Sure. So looking at the activity list that the student provides as part of the application really helps to give us as admissions officers a better sense of how you're using your time, how engaged you are in your school and local communities, and how you might be involved if you come to our campuses. And there is a lawnmower right outside my window, so I hope that that's not causing noise interference, but we'll do our best. So what we really want to know as we look at this activity section is what activities you're pursuing that you find most meaningful and your level of engagement in those activities. As we're bringing together a cohort of students, we don't want to admit, 800 students that all have very similar interests. We might think of it somewhat like putting together a patchwork quilt. We want to be bringing together students with diverse interests that will complement each other so that they can learn from each other. So we really do like to see that you're pursuing authentic interests, not choosing activities that you think will impress admissions officers, because what truly impresses us the most is seeing the unique ways that you're involved in the things that you are most interested in. And when you're filling out the activity section, one small note is if you're listing an activity or a club name that is not very obvious in terms of what the club actually does, please make a note to explain that. It will give us a lot more clarity. And sometimes, if you list something like the Waves Club, it's very difficult for us to determine whether that might be a swim team, a beach cleanup club, something completely different. And it can be very helpful to us to have that clarification. Also, as you're filling out the activity section, you don't have to keep your list to just like school clubs and athletic teams. Please also make sure to include your important family responsibilities, like possibly caring for younger siblings or caring for grandparents, as well as any paid work that you're doing or community service. These are important ways that you're using your time and important commitments in your life, and we want to be able to take them into account as well. And also be sure to highlight leadership roles in your activity. As you can see on the list on this slide, there is space to the right of the club names where you're able to list what levels you've been involved during your time in high school. And that can also just give us a better sense of the depth of your involvement in each area. And then if you are involved in an arts-related activity such as theater, dance, music, or film, you might also consider submitting an arts portfolio with your application. Typically, we will forward those portfolios to the relevant departments for faculty to evaluate, and then they provide their feedback to us to take into account as we're making our decision. And that can be a really nice way to highlight your talent as well, especially if you're considering potentially majoring or minoring in a field related to that art.
Okay, and so I can jump in and start talking about the essays and the interview. Really, this slide, though, is about the opportunities that you have in the application process to share your voice and show off your personality and tell your story. You know, as everybody has said so far, you know, we're trying to find students who are going to really thrive on our campuses, who are going to succeed and who are going to be unique individuals and bring a lot of things to campus. And so you have a lot of control over the essay, and that's going to be the best opportunity for you to really show off who you are and tell us how you might fit on our campus. And so there's a couple of snapshots here of different parts of the application where you have the opportunity to do that. But I'll start with the personal essay. So this is the best place for you to tell your story. You know, some people have something that's really central to their background or who they are as a person. Maybe they want to talk about a formative experience when they were younger, but you can also tell a simple everyday story. That's fine too. We know that you're a 17-year-old, maybe 16 or 18, you know, we know that you're a young person. And so there may not be this big life-changing thing that has happened. It might be a collection of small moments that make you who you are. And so whatever, you know, is important to who you are in your story, please tell us that. The essay, you know, that is usually a part of the main application. It's typically a longer essay. You know, for this one, it says 650 words. We've seen anywhere between 500 and 800. Use that space and use it well. Don't just write one paragraph. Don't just write 200 words. If it says 650 words, write just about that. We want you to use that space to tell us who you are. But there are going to be other parts where you can do that too. So the supplement, every college, or I shouldn't say that, many colleges have a supplement. And if there's a supplement, if it says optional, optional usually means go ahead and do it. So if you have the option to do a supplement or if it's required, make sure you're taking advantage of that space too. There could be additional essays or maybe short responses. And sometimes there's an opportunity for you to show that you've done research about a school. And so you can see here at the top, it says, please answer the following with words or sentences. And so this is more of a short answer thing. And so it's a way for us to get a glimpse into what you're excited by, get a glimpse into what you do with your time, similar to the activities. You may be able to expand on an activity that you've already mentioned on your resume, but this is an opportunity to add a few more lines about it. But then also we want to see that you have put in a little bit of research about our school. So if we ask you to say why you're a good fit for Vassar or Brandeis or Wesleyan or Bowdoin, we want you to tell us that. You know, do a little bit of research on our website to show that you have put in some effort and that you've really thought very intentionally about where you're applying. And so you may have the opportunity to talk about a major you're interested in, a class you want to take, maybe a research project you want to embark on when you're at the institution. There are a lot of ways we use this information in the application. Of course, it's a way to know you better, but you know, some of our colleges are looking at what's called demonstrated interest. So they want to see that you've interacted with the college. So Vassar doesn't necessarily think about demonstrated interest, but many other colleges do. You can drill down as far as how many times you open an email. That's a little crazy, but you know, to show that you've you know, interacted with us virtually, if you've come to online programs, or if you've put in the effort to do that supplement. And every school, there's a lot that you're going to have control over in the application, but there's a lot that you're not going to have control over. Every institution has their own priorities and what they're looking for when they build their class. Maybe it's a year where they're looking to increase the number of men on campus, or maybe there's a new soccer team and they're really looking to fill that soccer team. And so there are some things you don't have control over, but as much as you can do to get to know an institution to show how you might fit there is going to be important. And then the last thing here, of course, would be interviews. Interviews at many schools are optional, but again, if there's an option to do something, you probably want to take advantage of it, because it's just another way for you to show that you're putting in the effort, but also to show how you might fit there, show off your personality. We also get a lot of other information from interviews. Yes, you're answering questions about the activities you're involved with and the classes you're taking, and so that's all good information, but we really get an understanding of those soft skills. How do you communicate with somebody? Are you able to have a conversation very easily? Some of that's about English skills, but really it's more about how are you going to be in a classroom? Are you going to be able to interact with your peers in a residence hall? Are you going to be able to have a conversation with somebody in the dining hall? And so we get a lot of info from these interviews that really allow us to see how you might thrive on our campus. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Penn.
All right. Yeah, like I was telling Gloria earlier, my laptop today, after like a short break, decided to not work. So hopefully you can all hear me. All good? All right, cool. So letters of recommendation as part of the holistic review, it is also like another component colleges and universities consider. In the next few minutes, I am going to talk a little bit about what they are, who you should ask for a letter, and the importance in the entire process. So what exactly are letters of recommendation? They are basically written testimonials coming from your counselor, teachers, mentors, or other individuals who have the ability to talk a little bit more about your academic potential, your academic performance, or your personal characteristics, or your impact in your community, things like that. So they truly offer a third-party kind of like perspective beyond what your essay, academics, your other things did not even convey. So different schools may have different requirements when it comes to the number of letters of recommendation that they require, or whether it has to come from one from your counselor, one from your academic subject teacher, things like that. But generally speaking, you should ask for a letter from your counselor and another letter from one of your core academic subject teachers. I often get asked quite a lot when it comes to, letter recommendation from a teacher. So generally speaking, you should prioritize a teacher who teaches, like I mentioned earlier, one of the core academic subject teacher, that's English, math, social sciences, science, and language. And you should prioritize someone who truly knows you well and genuinely likes you, right? And ultimately, like I would say, prioritize teachers who taught you recently, relatively recent, because like they know the most updated information when it comes to your study habit, how you actually dealt with academic challenges, how you overcame those type of challenges, things like that. So the differences between counselor letters versus the academic subject, like teacher recommendations is, in my personal opinion, others feel free to jump in. I feel like for the counselor rec, it's more kind of like paint a broad picture in terms of who you are as a person, who you are as a peer. It offers insights in terms of, both in and outside of the classroom, versus when it comes to teacher rec, it really talks more about, your academic performance, your potential, things like that, allow us to zoom in into your academic ability a little bit more. So one's kind of more about the breadth, and then the other one is more about depth. And then who you should ask, like I've already touched upon that. And then finally, I would just like offer a little bit advice in terms of like how to equip your teachers, your counselors to write a good letter of recommendation. So one is definitely ask in advance. Don't wait until 2 weeks before your deadline and ask for your, counselor teacher to write a letter of recommendation for you. That's not nice, right? You also want to establish a genuine relationship and a strong relationship with your counselor, with your teachers prior, I would say generally speaking, before end of your junior year. So really make the process easier for them, provide them with information about yourself, some of the proudest moments in your high school area of growth, things like that, that can be super helpful. Or maybe potentially just like share a resume, which can also be helpful when it comes to prompting them what kind of things to include in your letter of recommendation. And then finally, I will touch upon a little bit about the importance of letters of recommendation in the decision-making process. Generally speaking, letters of recommendation is not going to be the make or break of your chances in terms of getting into a university, right? So in general, when we look at the letters of recommendation, we're truly trying to confirm what we've already seen in your application, what you've already shown, in your transcript, in your essays, all of that, interviews, things like that. But there are scenarios where it can be a little bit more pivotal when it comes to, that advocacy, or when maybe you just like added a little bit more context, the texture, or, like the nuance that we want to get to know a little bit more. So there are two examples that you see here on the slides. I'll quickly just kind of go through them. To show you how we really actually review those. The first rec discusses Maya's experience with bullying and how she actually dealt with stressful situations, right? So it really allows to connect the dots in the entire application. It provides context of Maya's academic performance. Maybe she did not always have like the straight A's, right? Not always just like, excelling in every subject. But now with the context, we know that she actually had so much in her personal life to overcome all of those challenges. And then now it makes sense in terms of the lower grades that we see in 9th or 10th. And they also demonstrate resilience, right? Which is something kind of like we consider as indicators of success, be able to tap into her support system and then overcome all of those type of obstacles, if you will. And then the second rec is for JT, right? So this one talks about how JT really evolves from a, like being scattered to someone who's just like being on top of everything. And then this again just like showcases the growth that JT has demonstrated over the years. Just like one thing to mention here, when it comes to your academics, when it comes to your letters of recommendations, we're not necessarily always looking for that straight A type of student. We're looking for that growth. We're looking for that, be able to utilize resources and come back much stronger. And I think I talked too much at this point already, and I'll kick it over to Gloria to bring us home.
Thank you. I am super impressed by all of you on the talk right now because you guys are asking really, really great questions. So thank you for being engaged and invested in this process. I think one of the things we could talk for hours and hours and hours about holistic review. Like obviously we're trying to cover all the little components that you want to consider. And from the questions, I'm getting a sense like, a lot of people understand or the academics feels in your control. So there's a lot of questions about how admissions officers kind of differentiate the different rigor in your program and like which classes you're taking. And so we didn't actually talk tons about course selection and how that's looked at. I am going to not sit on that right now, but if you are like, hey, Gloria, you should do a Tuesday talk purely on academic rigor, then I will, then I might do that. So, feel free to type in the chat. You're like, oh, could you please do a Tuesday talk just on rigor? Could you do a Tuesday? And we will do a Tuesday talk just on essays because there's enough to talk about essays in one whole hour as well. So if you're already starting thinking like, hey, I need more depth and detail about one specific component of the application, let us know so we can start planning for those talks. In the meantime, for the next 15 minutes, we're going to really talk about questions, but I wanted to kind of frame this a little bit because people are kind of like asking very specific questions about very specific components, even though we're talking about a whole picture. So to give a little bit of context, friends, to our audience, the question is always like, how much time do you really have? Like, are you spending like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 15 minutes on an application? You know, is it, you know, is there a cutoff? Like, can you guys explain a little bit of what it looks like, you know, pull the curtain back a little bit for your office on how it looks? You know, this image, everybody on this PowerPoint, is only one type of way that the path could go, the funnel could go. But, you know, anybody want to jump in first and talk a little bit about what review looks like in your office?
I can go. And I think there was like a question in the chat related to this as well, like in terms of like who is actually rating your application if you are transferring from one school to another. So like specifically at Brandeis, we follow the holistic application review process, obviously, and then typically our applications are sorted by your most recent high school geo market, allowing our admissions counselors who really know your most recent school the most to kind of like have the first step at your application, right? To serve as like the first starting point for a thorough but also comprehensive evaluation. And each year we actually go through very intense training to provide that standardized and objective judgments to all of our raters. And then how it works is typically follows each reader will carefully assess application in their territory, look at your application academic qualification, indicators of success, like I mentioned before, and potential fit for the university. And then after that, we will put the recommendation into the system that goes to either the second read or third read if needed. And then finally, we will have our committee meetings scheduled for different buckets of students. Maybe that's international, maybe that's domestic, maybe it's a committee for scholarships or financial aid, you name it. Different committees may take in different forms, right? So not necessarily all follow the same structure, but generally speaking, everybody will have their own voice heard at the table, make sure that different expertise among our raters are going to be highlighted, or different perspectives are going to be looked at that, right? We don't want just like have one set of eye looking at your application. We want to be fair and square, but also comprehensive. So that's typically what happens at Brandeis. And I saw like Miranda actually like unmuted yourself. So if you want to take over.
Sure, thanks, Pan. So at Wesleyan, we use a system called committee-based evaluation, or CBE. And like Pan said, it's really important to all of us to have multiple eyes on an application and get multiple people's opinions. So in our CBE process, the first read is actually a paired read, where the territory manager for the area where the student's most recent high school was will be paired with another reader on our team. And we will each look at a section of the application and discuss as we are reading it over Zoom. So we basically spend, you know, all of our days during reading season on Zoom from 9 to 5, reading in pairs. And then we spend roughly 8 to 10 minutes in regular decision on that first round read. Typically, the territory manager will focus more on the academic section and recommendations, while the reading partner will focus on the extracurriculars and the essays, and we discuss as we make a recommendation. And then those then go to committee for a second read, and our committees are composed of 4 to 5 admissions deans in our office who make a final recommendation, which is then reviewed one more time by our vice president of admission. So there are lots of people looking at each application as we go through the process.
Yeah, thank you for that. Any Jackie or Libby, do you have anything to add from kind of your perspective?
I'll just add very quickly, I think like the original question asked, how much time do we spend? And I think you can hear from, the responses so far, like there's a lot of eyes on the applications. There's a lot of time we spend in these, and I think at our selective institutions, we are spending a lot of time to make sure that we're picking the right students. And so, if I'm looking at an application, I spend as much time as I need to really get to know the student and get a full picture of who they are as an academic student, as a person in their extracurriculars, what they care about. If I'm looking at a really competitive student, I'm typically spending 15 to 20 minutes on my first read, and then it will go to a second reader, and then it will go to committee. And so I'm probably going to see it several times before a final decision is on there. But usually for me, a first read for a really competitive student, after I do a little bit of math and I figure out their, student's GPA on our scale, I'm typically spending about 15 to 20 minutes to really get to know a student.
Yeah, that's great. And I think as we go back to those questions about all of these questions about curriculum, I think one of the things that Jackie just mentioned, like a recalculation of GPA, like there is like training and thought behind how they look at your transcript. And so I know like sometimes you're just thinking, oh, it's just got to be straight A's and it just has to be a certain way, but there's actually some art and science to this in understanding where a student is academically. I will say that in talking to you all and other peer institutions and selective institutions that we've had on Tuesday Talks in the past, this population of audience, the academic piece is there. So if you're like questioning like, oh no, should I be taking this extra class? You probably have already, your profile probably, people have told me like 90%, even 95% of the applicants that they get from these regions that I'm talking to right now are academically qualified. And so we do start to then need to think about the other parts of the puzzle. And I know there aren't as many questions about that, but I did want to kind of address some of them. There's a question earlier here. Okay, so awards, let's talk about awards, because I think some people are concerned, like, do I have to have awards to be competitive? Are awards necessary for an application?
I can jump in here. This kind of connects to what Miranda was talking about as it pertains to kind of extracurriculars and the presentation of kind of what you're doing outside of class. If there are awards and honors that you want us to know about, that you have been awarded, that you have been given or are slated to receive, absolutely let us know. But if you do not have any awards or honors that you feel like you want to share with us, or you're nervous to share with us, that's okay too. Not every student who is admitted to Bowdoin has an award, has an award or honor listed. So it's absolutely something you can share with us and should share with us if you receive, but it is not a requirement for admissions. It is one piece of this application. So know that. And again, it is part of kind of your authentic presentation. What do you want us to know about you? And kind of how does that fit into what we're understanding about you through the other pieces of the application? So absolutely not a requirement to have awards and honors listed, but if you have received some and would love to share that with us, we enjoy seeing kind of what you've accomplished.
Anyone have anything to add? Okay. I have another question. This has come up in several forms. Let's talk a little bit about academic interests and how that is looked at in the holistic review. I know some colleges ask you, what's your first choice of major? Some are asking other, maybe an essay, a supplement, an essay question or an interview question about like, what are the things that you like to study? How is that considered? Is it considered? Like, why do you ask the question of what you're interested in majoring in if it's okay to have an open curriculum, for example? anyone want to jump in?
Yeah, I can start. I think this is going to be a little different at every institution. I think at a small liberal arts college like Vassar, we know that a lot of students are coming in undecided, and a lot of students will change their major a couple of times. So when we do ask students, what are you interested in studying? And that is valuable for us. We want to see that it's genuine. We want to see that, let's say a student's interested in music. Well, I do expect that that student is probably taking some music classes, or they're in a band, or we see it in their extracurricular activities. I want to know that it's genuine. So that's one way we use it, is it backs up some other things that we see in the application, or it reinforces some things that we see in the application. I also sometimes question if I see a student who's interested in music, but maybe there's no indication anywhere on their application that they like music, then I'm going to think, okay, what's going on here? Something's a little weird. Is this, is this really genuine? Maybe did they just think that Vassar wants music students this year? Like, that's not what we want. We want to see it to be genuine. I will also say, I think for some schools, schools that are maybe a little different than Vassar, if you're applying to a specific major in a specific school, there might be different requirements. And so really get a sense of the schools that you're applying to as to like what that, you may need to apply for a specific program or a specific major, for maybe larger schools. It might be that there's a specific school within the college, or college within the university. And so keep an eye out for other colleges that maybe aren't liberal arts colleges, where there might be very specific or very different requirements for some majors or programs.
I think Jackie covered pretty much everything. I'll just add one more thing here. So also sometimes it can be tied back to the institutional priority. Shameless plug here for Brandeis. We are going to have our first engineering program in 2026. So that year, if I see a student with engineering interest, I might actually take a second look at it, right? Like why you're interested in engineering, how you're going to fit into our curriculum, things like that. So also just like pay attention to the institutional priorities specifically for that year can also be helpful.
Yeah. And going back to it, I think it is about authenticity, right? Like, if you are really sincerely passionate about economics, but you're like putting a lot of other stuff in there, then there's like a question, it's just creating like, oh, what is the student actually interested in? And it's okay if you don't know, but it's just that you don't want to like try to fit yourself into what you think might be the institutional priority, or you think this is the easier major to get into or whatnot, and you're not being who you truly are. So, well, here's an interesting question, and we only have 3 minutes to address it. But can you think of an example where these other puzzle pieces actually pushed a kid up? Like where you're not sure, like on first look, you were like, but then something about something in the puzzle either pulled them up or gave you extra ammunition in advocacy in committee. I like to think it more like that. It's not that, because I think a lot of the kids actually, or students actually probably can head toward an admit bin, but yeah, this notion of what pulls a student up.
Sure, I can give kind of a quick thing. So it's not a specific example, but there was also another question about, a teacher putting something that's maybe a little negative in a recommendation. And I think this can kind of play into that. So, I've seen lots of applications where I'm looking at the academics and I see that, there are a couple of C's here and there. And so my first thought is, okay, maybe they're not the strongest student, but then I look at the recommendation letter and it says, oh, they really struggled in math, and math is not their subject, but and they were getting some low grades early on, but through the year they really came to extra help and they came to those support like tutoring sessions, and they really pulled up their grade, and it's still not an A, but it's a B+, and that's so much better than the C- they started with. And so, that's where something that's outside of the transcript gives a little bit more context and adds to the story. And so that's something that can be really helpful. And then kind of with that same example, I may see that a student is getting some lower grades in math, but they want to study English, and their English grades are phenomenal, and they're a wonderful writer, and they have done a summer writing program at Kenyon or Iowa. And so those are the extra kinds of things where it tells a little bit more of the story than just what's on the application, or excuse me, just what's on the transcript. And so that's where some of those other elements can be extremely helpful. And if I know a student is going to be engaging with the English department at Vassar and maybe not taking too many math classes because of that open curriculum, then I'm not as worried as about some of the lower grades I might see there. That said, we're still looking for strong students, so I'm not looking for an F. But if I see a B- in math, but I know that they pushed really, really hard for that B- and they put in the effort and they're going to do that same thing here, then I'm going to be confident in that.
Wonderful. Well, as always, the hour just goes by so quickly. And so we actually have to wrap up, but I am putting this slide up. So if you have specific questions about specific institutions, please do contact my friends here, and also know that they have lots of different virtual sessions as well. And some of them are kind of talking about these components of the application. So please go to their websites and look for any opportunities as well. We are excited about providing more information about the holistic review process. So again, if you heard something today and you're like, Gloria, I need more depth in this particular topic, email us, let us know so that we can kind of like go seek out other admissions officers to talk about these topics. We want to do talks that you guys find really helpful. So anyhow, Libby, Penn, Jackie, and Miranda, thank you so much for spending your Tuesday morning with us. And everyone else, if there are anybody, I'm going to stay on for about 10-15 minutes to answer any questions specifically about how interviews work in the admissions process. And so if you have questions about initial view, you can feel free to stay on. Otherwise, go enjoy your evening. It is late for some of you. Go to bed. Sleep is important in this process as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, friends. For those of you who are staying, happy to answer questions about initial view itself. And Jackie, Pan, Miranda, and Libby, y'all can take off unless you want to hang out and talk about initial view. You're welcome to do that too. For those of you who don't know, very quickly, Initial View is an interview platform. We interview students from all over the world, and all of those colleges that were just on the talk, they all accept Initial View as part of their process. There are many, many colleges. We sent interviews this past cycle to 400 programs. So it's a lot of schools that accept Initial View as a supplemental piece of the application. It is an additional piece. And as you noticed, there is a puzzle, right? And I think an interview often helps bring those puzzle pieces together. It is on that puzzle, it was one puzzle piece itself, but I actually like to think of it more as kind of the glue that holds everything else together. So there are some colleges, thank you for this question, some colleges do accept Initial View as a form of English proficiency. I know like Cornell probably has that as one of their options. Yale has that as one of their options. But many colleges are actually not looking at it for your English. They're actually looking at it for that context that they were talking about. You know, I liked that question about like, when does it actually help a student? When does it actually pull a student up if they're maybe wouldn't have gotten in? Now, I think the reality is you have to be, you have to have at least the academic chops to be able to survive at that school. So yes, the transcript, the test scores, that piece of your puzzle is going to be very, very important. But many of you have kind of circumstances in your life that may have impacted one of those grades in there. And so having an interview is a great way to kind of explain that and show growth. So the cost for Initial View, some of you are asking, is $245. And that is for the interview plus the writing sample. There is a writing sample component, which is an open-ended question that does not have a right or wrong answer. It's not an academic piece of writing, but it might be something like, you get into a taxi and you see $10,000. What do you do? So an opportunity for you to show a little bit of critical thought, creativity, but mostly it is a very authentic piece of writing that will help a college see who you really are. So the interview plus writing sample, you can send that to as many schools as you want. We don't charge additional fees for sending it to multiple schools. So it's the same cost if you decide to not send it anywhere, or you send it to one school, or you send it to 10 schools or 15 schools. If you are concerned about your speaking ability, I would not say don't do initial view right away. I would say you should at least try, and you don't have to pay to try. You can just get on a call with an English teacher, a friend, even if you want to try in your mother language first. Like if English is not your first language, try it in Chinese, Korean, whatever language you want to try it in, just for the sake of the conversation, because colleges are not looking for presenters, right? And I think that is the mindset that some parents feel, or some counselors feel like, oh, this person is not a good orator. They're not good at giving presentations. An interview is actually a conversation. My interview platform is actually a real person talking to the student. So it's not a robot interview. It is somebody who is going to give the student time. So for example, if I asked a student, what's the most meaningful activity you've done outside of school? And let's say the student gets caught off guard. They might, oh, I've done a lot of things. And then they might say, can I have a minute? And that is totally acceptable, because in real life, sometimes, like today, this morning, when I'm asking admissions officers about fun facts, they were definitely like, there was a moment of like, oh, you caught me off guard. I didn't think of my fun fact. And then they came in with it. And the interviewer is going to give that student a little bit of time. Sure, take a minute, think about it. So it's not so much about whether or not they can communicate immediately quickly. It is more about whether or not they're able to have a conversation. And at the end of the day, the college wants to make sure that when the student comes to campus, they're going to have a good experience, not just a good student experience as in I'm a good student and I listen well and I do my homework, but a good undergraduate student experience, meaning I have a good relationship with my roommate, meaning I am going to take advantage of office hours, meaning I'm going to join a club, meaning that I won't be just sitting by myself all the time. So just think about it that way before kind of making a decision of whether or not they should do an interview. The writing sample is different in that it is video proctored and it is timed. So a student will get a link, and then they will click on that link, and then they'll be given instructions. And when they're writing, there's a little timer that counts down. And then once that time is up, once the 20 minutes is up, the window closes. And so it is different than every other piece of writing in the application. In the application, people have to, people get the chance to edit and rethink and reformat. And, in the 20 minutes, you have time, a little bit of time to edit, but not a ton of time to edit. And so that is why it's the most authentic piece. And we send it along with the interview. And we've been doing this for over a decade. And so we have really strong relationships with colleges. They trust our process. And they have told us that the writing is often very, very helpful in the process. Any other questions? Sorry, I'm taking a look. Thank you for asking questions. You all have been really great at asking questions today. Let me speak to initial view versus school interview. Many colleges still offer, especially those small liberal arts colleges, a lot of them do offer their own interviews. The trend in college admissions is that these interviews have become less and less evaluative. They've been much more about kind of gauging interest from a student, and also it enables the student to have an opportunity to get to know the college. So actually, in those interviews, often the interviewer is selling their college a little bit and not so much evaluating the student. And the reason why the evaluation of the student has kind of gone a little bit away from its original intent is because they cannot meet the demand, so they cannot interview every single student that way. And also the quality control of the interviewer, maybe it's a senior student doing the interview. Sometimes it's an alumni who graduated many, many years ago. And sometimes it's an admissions officer, but those three are very kind of different people in the process. And so what I say to people, if you see an opportunity to do an interview with a school, you should take it because it's a good opportunity for you to get to know the school. As the admissions officer said multiple times, optional is a great opportunity. So take as many opportunities as possible. The difference with initial view is that initial view is recorded and it sits inside that file. That means that when an alumni does an interview or an admissions officer does an interview, that is not usually recorded. And usually it is a written report about the conversation. Now, if you have a really good rapport with that alumni or admissions officer, great. If you don't have a great rapport, then you're out of control of what they write in that report. And colleges will see the report, but they won't actually have heard the whole conversation. Initial view is where they can actually hear the whole conversation. The whole video is available in your student file. And as the admissions officers mentioned earlier, they do have multiple eyes on the file, right? You have a first reader, a second reader, and in some schools' cases, 2 readers looking at the same time. And in those situations, I've heard from admissions officers when they're doing that paired reading or the committee-based review, they have one person watching the interview while the other person is recalculating the GPA, for example. And then they share the information right then and there. But even as the person who watched the interview shares, they can easily say to their partner, just click on question 3. And then that person can also listen. So it's not just one person's opinion about a conversation, but multiple people. And the nice thing is calculating your GPA, while it takes a little bit of brain power, it's usually a quick calculation. And colleges have told me, we're actually listening to the interview while we recalculate the GPA. So it's nice that they don't necessarily have to spend 15 minutes separately watching the interview. They can actually watch the interview while they're looking at other parts of the application, which actually ends up making the read much more effective, because if they hear you talking, for example, about your experience, doing a service project, and they see it on your activities list, then it brings it to life. Then they're able to see oh, they actually really are interested in this activity, or, oh, they really were a leader in this situation. And so, yeah, it does add a lot to the read. Finally, I know I mentioned this earlier in the presentation, but these people that were on the call, they are international admissions officers. That means that their territory is an international region. That means they are the ones in the committee room that are advocating for your students. So it is really nice for them to have proof of the student right when they're advocating for you. So the first reader gets to watch it, but I think it's almost more compelling in committee when they're able to say, hey, I think Johnny should be part of this class, and here's why. And why don't you go ahead and listen to Johnny? Let's meet Johnny. And then they can meet Johnny for 30 seconds in the committee room. And so I always tell students, this is your way of actually being in the room where it happens. You can advocate for yourself in the actual initial view interview. Awesome. Any other questions? I will address, earlier somebody asked, what if the college doesn't know about my school? that's one of the reasons why I like Initial View, because I think that a student, if they're able to by themselves kind of share their intellectual curiosity and all of the, because I know in other countries outside of the US, there's a lot of self-studying going on because maybe you're in a national program and the national program doesn't have some subjects that your student is interested in. Then I know there's this tendency of like, okay, take extra classes, take some online courses, take some, because you're trying to bolster your child's curriculum or you're bolstering their academic achievements. The nice thing about Initial Views, you can kind of explain that. There's one thing about getting a lot of 5s on AP exams, but another thing where a student is actually really able to explain their true interests in learning, and a college can hear that. And so if they always say, if you don't have access to certain classes, we're not expecting you to take it. But they do like to hear about how you're making the most of what you do have and how you are excited about what to learn in the future through your interview. Yes, Andrea, I will talk to you. I would love to go to Vietnam with admissions officers. Please do invite your students to keep coming to Tuesday Talks. Until I can bring them to you, we will bring them to you online. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for spending your Tuesday, for most of you, probably evening with us. And again, please send feedback, send an email to contact@initialview.com if you're like, hey, it would be really good if we had a session about such and such. And that way that I can kind of approach admissions officers and ask them if they're willing to do a talk about something very specific. In the meantime, enjoy the last few weeks of school. I know some of your students are taking AP exams or finishing up IB. And so enjoy the last few weeks of school, and hopefully we'll have a Tuesday Talk before summer vacation. But if not, we will have it during summer vacation. We'll try to send you the dates earlier so you can send those to your students before you all go off. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.